I'm here with Educo expert John Faulkes, and today we're going to be talking about how you can get into the pharmaceutical industry as a career. This is something actually we get asked a lot on our live chat and lead forums. We get people wanting to especially for the course that you deliver actually for us, John, on the intro course, people wanting to get into the industry and not sure how to do it. So be really interesting to get your thoughts on this today. So what are your tips for people looking to get into the industry? What would your advice be to them?
Well, I have to firstly say, don't panic about the science. I mean, the industry, the pharma industry, is packed full of scientists and technicians who have obviously spent years studying their craft and their academic specialities. And so, you know, if you're not a chemist, or you're not a biologist, you're not one of those guys, you know, you're not going to walk into any of those roles, obviously. But there are many other many other jobs and professions in the industry that are possibly more accessible. So the first thing to say is that one route in might be into one of the key service providers to the industry, and that's a clinical research organization. So you may be aware that there's a huge amount of clinical trials run by the industry, but many of them, the logistics and the actual day-to-day sort of the grunt work in running a clinical trial is done by a specialist contractor called a clinical research organization, CRO. And there are a couple of interesting roles in a CRO. One is called a CRA, Clinical Research Associate. And they are essentially, well, they start off as monitors, if you like. They check on the progress of a study in a hospital somewhere because they have to be run according to regulatory rules. And they interview, they check, and they report back on whether the study is following the so-called protocol of the study. Actually, quite a lot of people have been recruited into that from being nurses, for instance, in the health service. A little bit of health service, healthcare knowledge is useful. There are some that are top experts in a CRO that are science qualified people, but some that are not. Another interesting role in a CRO is a project manager, and a project manager really coordinates the study work and reports back to the client. It's a sort of client management role. CROs run as tight operations, tight ship, and they are pressed on margins and on expenses and so on. So that coordination is very important. And I know people that have gone into CROs as trainee project managers, and CROs provide the training and so on. So that's one route in, I would say. Another thing is if you can feel you can handle it, is to get a job as a sales executive. So the commercial end of any pharmaceutical company has sales roles. There are many different kinds of sales roles. So companies producing extremely top-end innovative medicines really have sales roles that are out of reach of the average person. They are very science orientated, very technical. But many pharma companies and many so-called pharma generics companies, which is actually most of the medicine that's consumed in a country, have sales representatives that go out and talk to pharmacies and doctors and things like that, and sell. And you probably these days need to be a graduate, I would say, but not necessarily a sort of science expert. And most people who work in pharma companies don't want to be sales reps, and it's a great way into the business. Obviously, you need to be the right sort of person for it, but they provide lots of training and things like that. By far and away, though, I have to say the biggest area of need in pharma companies these days is for IT people. So the digitalization and the IT demand in pharma is going up exponentially. The very top expertise that is required by a pharma company right now, admittedly it's a bit special, but it's artificial intelligence. People with AI skills are in demand, and they will train you in the pharma techniques and the pharma language, if you like. But AI is AI, and it's a big thing. But there's all sorts of general IT growing apace in the industry. Everything's, as I said, becoming digitalized, from simply the global communications between the internal people in the industry to all sorts of systems and all sorts of stuff like that. So that's probably the biggest opportunity right now.
Thank you, John. It's interesting, these sort of roles you're explaining, because that, you know, it goes with, I don't know what the stat is now, but obviously half the money spent by a pharmaceutical company isn't on scientists, it's on marketing, sales, commercial, and you know, that you've mentioned that sales execs, IT is a growing area. So it's yeah, it's really interesting actually. And the IT bit as well, it's a good, another point. I was at a conference, and that obviously IT people and artificial intelligence and big data scientists are in demand, not just in pharmaceuticals, but in every industry. And there's not many of them around. So I think they were explaining how they were trying to train their biologists to become data scientists because they couldn't get data scientists.
I would say that if you look at people who are now, say, at school or at university, people who have done just a bit of science at school, let's say, up to 18, certainly if you've done it up to 18 and are very switched on with IT, are going to go far. They are in demand. They're going to be a future successful people. That increasingly companies will be offering apprenticeships in the future and all sorts of things like that. I have to say as well, some of the most coveted jobs in pharma are in marketing. Marketing in pharma is big business. It's highly, very, very highly resourced. But most people in marketing started as sales reps, as junior sales reps somewhere, peddling, like playing their trade with doctors and with pharmacies and things like that.
Talking to their market and understanding their market. Drugs. Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, interesting times.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Thanks for that. It's really good alternative roles there and insight into or also areas that are growing that people can consider to get into the industry. Thank you, John. Thank you for your time today. That's been really insightful, and yeah, thanks a lot.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Alex. Yes.